Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Thank you for downloading Tucker Center Talks. This is Season 1, Episode 1, and I'm Nicole LaVoi. Hello, and thank you for listening to the first ever Tucker Center Talks, a podcast from the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport at the University of Minnesota here in the U.S., and a co-production with Wisp Sports. I'm your host for Tucker Center Talks, Dr. Nicole LaVoi, Director of the Tucker Center. And I'm joined by Chris Stafford, President and CEO of Wisp Sports.
Well, Nicole, first of all, a big welcome. Thanks for introducing me and opening the show so professionally. And I just wanted to say a very big welcome to the Wisp Sports team here and the network that we have of women's podcasts. As you know, we are the only podcast network in the world for women's sports, and we're delighted that you're joining us to have your regular podcast here and also to be an affiliate partner. So how does it feel to be a podcaster?
It feels great. It's something that we have been wanting to do for quite a while, and I was thrilled when you called and suggested this collaborative partnership. So it feels really good.
All right. Well, I'm going to hand it back to you then to get to your first ever episode, and the best of luck. Welcome aboard.
Thanks so much, Chris. In this first podcast, I will tell you all about the Tucker Center in terms of who we are and what we do in our research, our outreach, and our educational programming. And I'll also outline some of the topics we have lined up for you in the coming months. Really, though, we'd like to hear from you. What topics about research on girls and women in sport would you like for us to cover? What issues are on your mind? What research ideas or topics would you like the Tucker team to discuss on this podcast? We are certainly open to your suggestions, and if you have any, tweet us at Tucker Center or to me directly at Dr. Sports Psych. As the leading research center for girls and women in sport in the world, we want to use this podcast to leverage our knowledge, data, and network of scholars and practitioners to inform a wider audience about women and girls in sport. And we are so thrilled to be partnering with Wisp Sports to do just that. Now, there might be many of you listening to this podcast that are unfamiliar with the Tucker Center. But even for those of you who know about the Tucker Center, I get many questions about how did we start? Who funded the Tucker Center? And what exactly is it that you do at the Tucker Center? So I am going to just start from the very beginning and tell you a little bit about the Tucker Center. So the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport was founded in 1993 by Professor Mary Jo Kane with a generous gift from Dr. Dorothy Tucker. At that time, it was the first center of its kind in the whole world, solely dedicated to the study of girls and women in sport. We used to say that we were the first and only research center of its kind, but that's no longer true, which speaks to how much work and social change is needed for sportswomen around the world. And we use our data to help drive that change. The Tucker Center has a threefold mission. We conduct research, we do educational initiatives, and we do outreach that makes a difference in the lives of girls and women in and through sport. For nearly 27 years, we have been considered by many to be leading this effort based on our research and scientific excellence on issues of great national and local significance. And I would add that probably includes global and international significance, as recently in the last, I'd say 2 to 4 years, we've been collaborating more with colleagues around the globe to amplify our mission. Through this research and our evidence, we encourage other researchers and policymakers, decision makers, media, educators, parents, and practitioners to work together and collaborate to better the lives of girls and women in ways that go far beyond the playing fields. In future podcasts, you will hear directly from Professor Mary Jo Kane, our founder and first director, on how she founded the Tucker Center, the arc of her career as a gender and sports scholar, and the impact of her research. Professor Kane has recently is in phased retirement currently, and we are honoring her in our Fall Distinguished Lecture Series, which I'll talk about shortly. But she has handed over the directorship of the Tucker Center to me, and that is a great honor. And I am currently now the second director of the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport. So speaking of research, everything that I talk about on this podcast is available free of charge on our website at tuckercenter.org. We're really proud that the materials and resources that we generate in the Tucker Center from our data are available free to the public. We think that's important, and that's also a big part of who we are and what we do. Obviously, with the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport, the research that we are known best for typically falls within three categories. The first pertains to sport media portrayals of women. Dr. Kane has led this line of inquiry over the last 2 to 3 decades, focusing on how often, or more likely not, sportswomen are portrayed in the media. And when they are portrayed, that most often they are sexualized and their athletic competencies are minimized and or marginalized. There are a lot of podcasts on WISP sports that focus on this issue, and our data in this area is cited frequently and often by others in the sportswomen landscape. More recently, Dr. Kane and I have worked with other colleagues in the Tucker Center affiliated scholar network to produce data to refute the idea that sex sells women's sport. So spoiler alert, we found it does not sell women's sport, and in future podcasts, we'll talk in much more depth about that line of inquiry. The second line of research the Tucker Center is known for, and which is my particular focus, is around women in sport leadership. There are decades of and piles of research that document the barriers and supports for women coaches. And we like to use that data to help sport organizations work to create a better occupational environment where all women, regardless of their intersectional identities, because not all women are the same, we're mothers, we have different racial and ethnic backgrounds, different sexual and gender identities, and we're different ages. But what we try to do in the Tucker Center is use our data to help decision makers and those in power create environments where all women coaches can feel safe, valued, and supported, because we know from the data this currently is not the norm. And as our colleague Pat Griffin has called it, the college athletics war on women coaches, which is a pretty strong statement, but I have to say, based on the data, I agree with her. So to document the progress or regression of the percentage of women coaches over time, in 2003, we started the Women in College Coaching Report Card. We're currently in our 8th year. And the reason why we started this report card was to complement and extend the long and important work of Doctors Vivian Acosta and Linda Carpenter, who many of you, if you're listening to this podcast, probably know their work or have cited their work. They documented the percentage of women in college sport leadership positions since the 1970s. And I can tell you, I use their work all the time. And I thought as they were retiring, I felt it was an important milestone to continue and extend their work. So the Women College Coaching Report Card drills down to the institutional level by giving a grade, A through F, to schools, sports, and conferences for the percentage of women head coaches of their women's teams. Now, I get asked a lot, well, what about the men's teams? And I say, well, we know from the data that there's very few women currently coaching men at the collegiate level. So it's just not a good use of our resources and time to code the very few women that are coaching men. Now, I'm hoping over time that will increase, and then perhaps we can have an extension of the report card. But currently, we are collecting data for our 8th year of the report card for 2019-20. And in the future podcast, I'll talk much more about the report card data, some interesting trends that we've seen over the last years pertaining to the data, and perhaps kind of give you a high-level analysis of the questions and the comments that I get around this report card. It's been a really fascinating process to have this part of the Tucker Center bandwidth in terms of the research that we do. So we do sport media research, we do women in sport leadership research, and the third area of research that we're known for is the girls' physical activity and sport participation. Every 10 years, we put out a multidisciplinary, evidence-based report called Developing Physically Active Girls. About a year ago, in the fall of 2018, we released our third such report, which is really a comprehensive summary of the latest research around what is known and not known about girls' physical activity. What are the benefits that accrue? What are the barriers they face? What are different groups of girls based on their intersectional identities of race, gender, sexual orientation, physical abilities, and immigrant status? What do we know about girls' sport and physical activity participation? That report, as well as the executive summary, like I said, is available to download free of charge on our website at tuckercenter.org. The other bucket of research that we are known for in terms of girls' physical activity, which reduces barriers for a particular group of girls, is our research led by Dr. Chelsea Thule, who's a Tucker Center affiliated scholar. She and colleagues have worked on reducing one particular barrier for East African immigrant girls in our community here in the Twin Cities. She's worked with girls and community elders to design and develop a clothing line that helps East African girls participate in sport, but also be sensitive to cultural and religious traditions of being covered while participating in physical activity. This is a great line of our research and is a really good example of how we try to collaborate with community partners and answer critical questions and address social problems in our research. And we knew from the girls in the East African community that they wanted to be more physically active, but that clothing was a large barrier for them to do so. So really proud around that line of research. And I'll have Dr. Thule and our community colleagues on to talk more about that research in a future podcast. All right, so I've told you about our 3 lines of research that we're known for, and we certainly have other ones that we do through our Tucker Center affiliated scholars, but those are the 3 main areas: sport media, women in sport leadership, and girls' physical activity. In terms of our outreach, which is the other part of our mission, we have 3 events that we host annually: our Distinguished Lecture Series, our Women in Sport Film Festival, and our Women Coaches Symposium. Our Distinguished Lecture Series happens normally every October. This year it will be October 15th, and we are featuring our very own founder, Dr. Mary Jo Kane. Over time, we've hosted nearly 50 such lectures that invite the best and brightest scholars from around the world to talk about cutting-edge topics around girls and women in sport. Luckily for you, our listeners, we have a video archive of most all of these 50 lectures on our website at tuckercenter.org. We hear from people around the world that they often access these videos for their own purposes, for classroom modules, and community partners use this for their own purposes. So this is a really rich source of information that is readily available and free of charge. Our Women in Sport Film Festival happens every February. We host this because we knew that in the media, we rarely see or hear about sportswomen and women's sport, and particularly in sport films. So to honor National Girls and Women's Sport Day that happens every year in the US here in early February, we thought we'd start a film festival. We currently are taking submissions until November 1st, and if you want to see some of the past films that we've had in the film festival, you can go on our website, and we have an archive of that. Our Women Coaches Symposium, which will be our 7th annual one, happens in April. This year it will be April 24th, 2020. To our knowledge, this is the largest Women Coaches Symposium that hosts all women of all sports and all levels, and those who also support women coaches, which includes a handful of male allies who hire and mentor and sponsor and champion women coaches. This event is co-hosted by We Coach and Go for Athletics. One signature part of the Women Coaches Symposium is our Jean K. Freeman keynote. And this year, our Freeman keynote will be Miss Val, Valerie Condos Field, who is the former UCLA gymnastics coach and multiple national champion. In the past, we've had Jill Ellis, Cheryl Reeves, Sue Enquist, Susan Teeter, and Lynn Dunn. And we invite really women who exemplify high performance coaching, but are also committed to developing their athletes as people on and off the court or the field. Registration for the Women Coaches Symposium will open December 3rd, and all the info you could ever want to know about the Coaches Symposium is at wcs.umn.edu. And you can also find the link to that on our main Tucker Center webpage, as I mentioned, tuckercenter.org. All right, so we've talked about our research. I've told you about our 3 primary outreach efforts that we host annually. And because education is also part of our mission, I will end this podcast by telling you a lot about the educational part of our mission. For those of you who know the Tucker Center or have seen members of the Tucker team speaking in your communities or at your sport organizational national meetings, we do frequently travel around the globe to give workshops, keynotes, and presentations on various aspects of our research on girls and women in sport. So in a few days, I'll be getting on a plane. I'll be flying down to New Zealand, as New Zealand and our colleague down there, who was a senior Fulbright scholar, Dr. Sarah Lieberman, and her colleagues are launching a Women in Sport initiative in New Zealand, and I'm flying down there to help them do that next week. So we produce reports for free, and I also mentioned that. We also have produced 3 Emmy-nominated documentaries that are also available on our website. Our first was Concussion in Female Athletes, so we did in 2011 already. Media coverage in female athletes, which actually won a regional Emmy for Best Sports Documentary. And our most recent documentary, Game On, Women Can Coach. And currently I'm developing a toolkit that goes along with Game On, Women Can Coach, and a short version with our collaborative partner, TPT Minnesota, which is a PBS television affiliate. So we have speaking workshops, we have reports, we have educational documentaries. In terms of education, we also offer graduate assistantships for graduate students at the master's and PhD level. We have a summer gender equity internship program and a graduate Borton fellowship that runs in the summer. And I also teach in the School of Kinesiology. I get asked a lot, what else do you do? Do you just run the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport? Which is a full-time job, but I do also teach classes in the School of Kinesiology around social behavioral aspects of sport. And to amplify our educational mission, we have an amazing network of affiliated scholars around the world, and you can see a list of them and read more about their bios on our website. I think that really gives you a pretty good overview of what we do here in the Tucker Center. In future podcasts, we will hear from some of our network and affiliated scholars and the Tucker team about our cutting edge topics. Now, in the queue for future podcasts, under my top 5, the next 5 will be tackling, because these are questions and comments and inquiries that I get a lot recently, are around, number 1, we'll talk about our Women in College Coaching Report Card. Number 2, we'll talk about women in coaching, the barriers, the model that we use for talking about women in coaching, and we'll talk about recent data about our online coaching bios that tell us how inclusive and open college athletic departments are in terms of diverse family narratives in college athletics. The third podcast we'll do is why women coaches matter. You would be shocked and surprised, well, maybe not if you're listening to this podcast, about how often I get this topic. Tell me, Dr. LaVoi, why do women coaches matter, and why should we want to hire more women? Well, I have an answer to that, and we can talk about what we know from the data. Number 4, coaching girls. This is a really, really hot topic right now, and I am going to take an approach of what we know from the data and why this approach might reinforce gender stereotypes that are detrimental to girls and also detrimental to boys. As if we're focusing on girls, maybe we should focus on how to coach children. This is a little bit of a contested idea, so I'm really excited to dig into that topic. And then the 5th one that we'll do is countering false narratives about girls and women in sport. I get asked all the time, what does the data say about girls in sport participation? What do we know about women in coaching? And what do we know about women in the sport media? And there are a lot of false narratives about girls and women in sport. And I'm going to use this podcast to dispel those narratives and give our listeners some counter narratives that are much more productive about girls and women in sport. And then I know I was going to give you 5, but I mentioned this earlier. The 6th one that we'll do in pretty short order is I will invite our founder and first director, Dr. Mary Jo Kane, to talk about her career as she is retiring. I often get asked what the Tucker Center does, so I hope this gives you a broad overview of our research, our educational and outreach efforts. I look forward to going into more depth in future podcasts with you on Tucker Center Talks.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
I'd love to hear from you if you have topics you'd like us to cover. Tweet it to us at Tucker Center or to me directly at Dr. Sports Psych. Check out our website at tuckercenter.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can find the show notes with links and resources for this episode at wispsports.com. Look for Tucker Center Talks under the Listen tab. You'll find a lot more conversations from the world of women's sport, too. Make sure to follow Wisp Sports on social media at Wisp Sports. Please share and follow this podcast and others that you listen to there. You can also reach us via email with any questions, comments, or suggestions to info@wispsports.com. Thank you for listening, and help us turn up the volume on women's sport. That's a wrap for episode number 1 of Tucker Center Talks. I'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode. I'm your host, Dr. Nicole LaVoi, signing off.